Are you ready for some tea? Some wedding tea? Well, welcome to my YouTube channel. It's Desiree here, and I'm so excited to see you. Allow me to sit this down. So, as usual, I have another real wedding story for you. And this one, honestly, you probably aren't going to believe. But like I always say, this really did happen. So let's go ahead and get started. I think we will call this one Switch-A-Roo. Yeah, Switch-A-Roo. No, you will not have any idea how this story is going to end. But let's go ahead and get started, and I'll share some background with you. This story happened very early on in my career, almost 2 decades ago. So I don't have all the specific details, but you'll get the gist of where I'm going with this story. Now let's talk about the couple. This was a young couple. They were very much in love. They were planning this wedding and pretty much financing the wedding themselves. The groom had a really good job. He was in corporate America, and the bride was a student as well as she worked at a daycare. Early on in my career, I would have couples come to my home because I didn't have an office at that time. All right. So they would come to my home, and this is where meetings, in-person meetings, and contract signings would take place. So the couple comes over, they sign the contract, the groom puts the deposit down. Throughout the conversation of kind of getting to know them early on, I discovered that the groom was very much loved by the bride's parents. And again, the bride seemed happy. She had made the right decision. And I'll be honest, looking at them as a couple and me having a daughter, I was like, oh, she's got a gem. All right, girl, you did good in life, right? The groom paid the deposit, and they left my home just as happy and giddy as ever. So let the planning process begin. I will say, because the groom worked so much and the bride did as well, most of the planning took place via email and over the telephone. So I didn't see them too often. And at this time, Zoom wasn't popular. So imagine how old this story is. So yes, phone, email, or in person is how we handle these wedding plans. All right. When it came to the planning, the couple both had input, but when any information was being shared with me, it pretty much filtered through the groom. He was very intentional about how he wanted the wedding to be. He was super excited once again, and the bride, she did have input, no doubt, but the groom was much more active than she was. So several months had passed within the planning process, and I'll be honest, I had not seen them in person. And I had noticed that the groom was pretty much the only one who was contacting me and making arrangements, signing contracts, all of those great things. So I reached out to the bride and I'm like, hey, how are you? Just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a minute. Wanted to put voice to voice versus email and just check in and see how you were doing. She seemed to be okay, but she was not her upbeat, normal self that I was used to. I asked her, is anything going on? Are you okay? I've been noticing that your fiance has pretty much been the one contributing all of the information. I just wanted to check in and make sure all was well. She told me everything was good, but she would reach out to me later to discuss some things further. I'm like, okay. I went on about my business. About a week or so later, she emailed me and she says, Desiree, hey, I need to meet with you. I'm like, okay, what is this about? She was like, well, we're going to have to make some changes when it comes to the wedding planning. I'm like, oh my God. So look, anytime someone says they need to reach out to me and they need to make some changes within the wedding planning, there's only a few things that come to mind. The first one being they don't have all of the money to plan this wedding and they need to change the date. Okay. The second one is typically what happens. Oh, I'm pregnant and I do not want to walk down the aisle with a big old belly. So we probably need to change the date. So those were the two things that came to mind when she had reached out to me. I wasn't going to stress about either because like I said, she said she wanted to meet. I'm going to give her time to come over to my home so we can have this conversation and decide what the next steps need to be. I did notice within the email that she sent me is that she said she would be coming. Now, remember, the groom is very active within the planning process. So I am a bit concerned because I'm like, well, why is she the only one coming? But again, he worked a lot and he was in corporate America. So maybe he had some meetings or maybe this was something very personal to her that she wanted to discuss with me. Either way, we set a date for her to come on over to my home. So I'm getting my home prepared, making sure everything is good, getting all the paperwork together in case we need to, move forward with some additional planning. Just make sure I have all my ducks in a row for when she arrives. I get a knock at the door. All right. Knock, knock, knock. And I see her and another gentleman. I'm like, okay, hey, how are y'all doing? Good. Welcome. I didn't know much about her family, so I'm going to be honest with you. I thought this was a brother or a cousin. Heck, it could have been a next door neighbor. They take a seat and I said, hey, bride, what's going on? Let's talk. She was a bit nervous, no doubt. I'm like, okay, well, let's take it slow, breathe, kind of let me know what's going on. Now, mind you, I'm surveying the room because I'm trying to figure out who old boy is, right? And I'm also looking at her to see if she's got any protrusions from her belly. She says, Desiree, we have to change the date. Okay, no problem. At this point, again, it's very early on in my career. I don't really have clauses in my contract in regards to date changes. Like, we're just going to change the date. And if I got it available, great. If not, we'll find a date that I do have available. I'm like, okay, we need to change the date. No problem. May I ask why we need to change the date? She took it slow, but she ultimately told me that she was pregnant. Yeah, I kind of guessed that based on just the email and how she was acting. But once again, I was still confused as to why this gentleman was in the room and he wasn't saying much. He's just sitting next to her, I guess being her support. I'm not really sure, but we'll get to that very soon. I says, okay, you're pregnant. She says, yeah, I'm about 2 months pregnant. And so we need to change the date. I need to push the wedding back. Of course, I understand that because based on the date in which they were to get married, she would have been walking down the aisle almost 7 to 8 months pregnant. And I'm sure she didn't want that. Okay. So I says, hey, let's look at a calendar. Let's decide on a new date. And then I'll reach out to the venue, the vendors that we've already contracted, kind of give them some insight as to what's going on and discuss the date change with them. She's like, okay, great, Desiree. That is so wonderful. Thank you so much for taking care of that for me. I was really nervous. I wasn't sure how you were going to handle this or how you were going to feel about a date change. I'm like, honey, don't worry about it. I didn't want to let her know I need this wedding because I need this coin, but it is what it is. I said, all right, so cool. She says, yeah, also, I need to tell you something else. I'm like, okay, hey, go ahead. Let me know what's going on. She says, yeah, so in addition to being pregnant, I want to introduce you to this gentleman that is sitting here with me. I'm like, all right, you already did that. You told me his name was such and such. She was like, yeah, I need you to understand his position in my life. Now, I thought that was a bit odd. I'm like, okay, his position in your life. Let me give you a little visual on this situation. In my home during this time, there's a dining room table. There's 6 chairs, all right? I'm on one side of the table. Her and this gentleman are on the other side of the table. They are sitting next to each other, but nothing seemed to bring off any alarms or make me feel any kind of way, okay? He was a nice guy. He just listened intently, didn't really have much to say. But let me speak about what he looked like, and nothing negative to this, okay? He had on gym shoes. He had on jeans, a white t-shirt. He had on some necklaces. All right. I don't remember exactly what they were. I do remember him coming into my home with a baseball cap on. He did take the cap off once he entered my home, and he had dreads. Nice looking guy. All right. Nothing to alarm me. Like I said, at this time, I'm taking meetings in my home, so I got to be really cautious about who I'm letting in here. The bride goes to tell me I need to introduce you to him. I'm like, in my mind, you've already done that. So keep going. She says, I need to let you know about his position in my life. All right. Is he your brother? Is he your cousin, your nephew, your uncle? I know he's not your dad. So come on, speed this thing up. She says, yeah, he's the father. Oh, shit. Let's pause right there. And I'll catch you next time on some wedding tea. Tune in next week for some more wedding tea.